Really, I've got four core themes for today. We need to work together, whether that's the third sector, business, government, I was going to say academia. We need to work together. Together we are stronger, and together we are the only ones who will deliver this. What is government's role as an enabler? Is it doing the right things? And lastly, because it keeps on coming back, is an issue of timeliness. How quickly is this going to happen? But that's probably actually not the core question. It goes back to the point that Graham raised. Fail quickly. Try, fail quickly. We can't predict the future. No one can at the moment. We just know it's going to be different. So you do need to be agile, fail quickly, and in government that is a bit of a challenge, because of course every time I fail quickly, that means I've wasted your tax pound. So how do we look at how I'm regulated and controlled so I can be allowed to fail quickly? There are a few caveats, there always will be in a government thing. The budget's out tomorrow, so I'm not going to give any views into that. I know Millie mentioned earlier about the Innovation Fund. I will not talk about that either. And as you know, Peter Fairbrush, our President for the Committee of Economic Development, has a number of sector statements coming out on the 13th of December. And I won't give too much away at that, but I might hint at a few. So, Smart Guernsey falls into a range of areas, but this is what it's really about. How do we empower our citizens, enable business, and improve the delivery of government services? At the core of it, it's really straightforward. And I won't go into too much detail because Mark's covered a lot of this. But the world is about to radically change. And I come back to the issue about timeliness. This was the Global Risk Report given at Davos in January of this year. And the 12 core technologies that were going to change the world. And it was, well, that's really interesting, etc., etc. We launched, one of these is blockchain, and through Northern Trust, I know Stuart will speak about that later, we launched that 3 weeks later. Robotics and AI. We in government are trialling robotic and AI solutions. This is not the far future. This, unfortunately, isn't Blade Runner 2049, which I will be going to see this week. This is reality. And as Mark said, the practical upshot of this, and this is drawn from an Oxbridge report, is a number of jobs that will disappear from the current environment. Our probably closest is the UK, and that's a prediction of 35% of current jobs will disappear by 2020, 2025. From a global point of view, China, still largely an agricultural and manufacturing base, 77% of their jobs. The social economic impacts of these are huge. That also therefore provides an opportunity for jurisdictions that are stable and can lever this. But do not underestimate the social economic impact. The other part that's linked with that is where you are on the social economic strata. Those with higher education survive better because of the information, knowledge, wisdom curve that Mark showed earlier. So that's really the future. But Guernsey doesn't move, does it? So how much do you think's really going on? Are we doing AI and robotics at the moment? Well, government is. How many of your businesses are? I know some are. We've said that writ large. 1.2 million devices at Graham globally run out through a single data centre in Guernsey by a Guernsey-based company. Commercial blockchains. Stuart will speak about it later. Graham's working one. There's at least 3 or 4 others I know of actively on the island at the moment. Okay, so we're Ethereum mining. Anybody know what I'm talking about? This is, you remember it as sort of, blockchain, all that sort of horrible stuff about, cryptocurrencies. I've asked them, I can say this, we do have someone in the island who has mined millions of pounds worth of Ethereum out of a potting shed in Guernsey. How he converts that into real money is a challenge, and we're helping him do that. These are micro industries. This young gentleman has earned more money in 2 years than I've earned in my lifetime. That says probably more about me than him, but never mind. Okay, data trustees, work's going on that. How do we turn data into a commodity that we can protect? Goes back to Graham's point earlier. Digital agents, your driverless cars, who's responsible when the thing crashes or you crash into it? Once again, through the work in the GFSC, that work's going on at the moment. Electronic census. We do have, as Graham said, one of the first electronic censuses anywhere in the world. More about that later. Mass geotagging, that's a cry for Jay Ulmer and his work at Tag Team, will come later. Crypto vaulting, we do that at scale already. JT's mentioned that already. So what's next? Please be under no illusion, Guernsey is already a data-driven industry and a data-driven economy. You may not know about it, but everything is. And if you don't think it is, you fundamentally misunderstand your business and misunderstand the environment, and we need to get on with it. Which therefore then, I'm going to call a call to arms. Where do we want to be? So the figures are increasing size of profit margins for companies based on an MIT research into 5,000 businesses. So, the easiest one, because I like this stuff, I just do digital stuff. I'll do stuff to you because you'll enjoy, and it's very clever, and I can stand up here and be really clever. But actually, that doesn't drive the economy, nor does doing nothing, because that's innovate or die. Conservatives do it little by little, but we'll fall behind. Unless we have a digital transformation driven by government, industry, and the third sector, that is where, and that goes straight to the point that Graham was mentioning earlier, that is where we will truly thrive as a jurisdiction. And government has hopefully, and I think you agree this without going into the budget tomorrow, given some pretty clear direction on where it wants to go, within some of the limitations, of course, that governments do have. So you have the Policy and Resources Plan, your top left, the Medium-Term Financial Plan. Resources have been assigned to this. We have the challenge now of delivery, but resources have been assigned. The Public Sector Reform Framework and the Economic Development Digital Sector Framework. So a huge amount of direction, and of course, Peter Fairbrush will reiterate some of this in his sector statements in December. But everything that's been mentioned so far today has been identified as one of the 10 action plans. And government is transferring resource in order to do this. The latest one, just to embarrass her at the back, is Lucy Witham. Stand up, Lucy. Who by background is an educationalist, but now works for economic development, because it's the same thing. But in those, the core issues, everything from connectivity to cyber, have all been identified and will be worked on. So I'd love to turn around and say, of course, I haven't had political direction. Yes, I have. And we are moving into delivery. Yes, I don't expect the road to be totally smooth. Yes, it will be rocky in certain areas. Yes, fail fast has challenges for the taxpayer pound. But we are moving into it. So how do we in government look at this? And that goes into the second part is, how do I work through in government and some of the things that we are doing as a practical example? This slide deck, which I call the Wall of Doom, was put together 2.5 years ago, not long after I arrived, by myself and Dr. Jane Wanacott, who's the Director of ICT in the States of Guernsey. Parts that people want us to do is at this top level. You want us to transform health and social care, you want us to transform justice and equality. But, as Graham said, you've got to do all the other stuff as well. You've got to have a baseline connectivity network. You've got to get your regulations in place. So over the last 2 years, we've classified them all: core capabilities, enabling and compliance. And that's how far we've got. A number of areas have been completed, a number of areas have been commenced, and we're a long way down the path, and we're running pilots in all other areas. This is a massive change. Unfortunately, of course, a lot of it is behind the scenes as you build the framework and you build the foundations up. But they are coming in to the future. So, and to steal from the Policy and Resources Plan, we are great today. How are we going to be better tomorrow from government? And here's a few examples of the work we're doing at the moment, and I'll just go through each of them in turn. A lot of talk's been done about the e-census. Yes, we do collect a lot of data on everybody. We can now smash it and use it together for statistical purposes, etc., etc. One of the issues, so we knew in broad terms, so it doesn't sound too 1984-ish, We know a lot about you today, we know a lot about you yesterday. The core for policy, using big data, is how do we analyse that to tell us a lot about you tomorrow. So working with Dory Financial, someone from Dory Financial has to be in the room somewhere, there we go. We came up with something called the Guernsey Economic Model, which they then renamed the Government Economic Model to market it more widely. Good piece of marketing. Because using big data to predict with a fair degree of detail things like age-based and demographic progression going through the years becomes critically important. Not just, there's a dependency ratio of 0.65, what does that actually mean? What does the over 85 population mean? What does it mean at this sort of level of detail when you have a flatlining population over the age of 65, but effectively almost doubling in the next 30 years? Do we have enough people of working age to pay for that level of healthcare? Which then puts two questions: either change the model of healthcare, and I don't mean about removing services, I mean do it differently, as Mark mentioned earlier, or change the population model. Now, I'm not a politician. It's not my decision to say what the answers to those questions are. As a civil servant, I'm working with Helen Walton, who's in the room, as well as our head of data analysis, is to pose the question to the politicians. Because knowing the future allows you to adapt. And the challenge goes back, we have to adapt quicker than we were before. Another example, as I said, is forecasting GDP. GDP has a material effect on a lot of things, whether relative or specific. At the moment we use government actuary services. We're going to predict it differently, and then more importantly, apply scenarios. So the second model, I won't go into the detail. I'm sure either Helen or Dory Financial will take you through this in levels of detail you'd be terrified of. But what it's really about is saying, what is the scenario if we didn't become hyper-connected? If we lost our air, sea and digital links? Not completely, but we didn't invest in those. What does that mean in GDP? We now model those, which then feed back into policy making. Skipping on, this is a program called Future Digital Services. It was a public PQQ, but I won't go into too many details, predominantly because we are at the moment in the middle of our first engagement with potential suppliers. The key I'd say is we were looking to say, how do we deliver IT services to government differently in the future? And of course, the first point you raise is, well, of course, you want to do it better and quicker and cheaper. But that's not the point. We need to do it differently. How does government stimulate the economy by doing this? How does government stimulate the advancement of businesses on the island through doing this? How do we balance those three core points in the centre? Deliver it. That thing of it just needs to work for government and for customers. Act to enable public sector reform, which we don't understand about, and make a meaningful contribution to the development of all sectors on the island. This is a totally different form of procurement. And it's really exciting. But as I said, this is ongoing at the moment, so I'll skip over it without going into too many details. Graham mentioned this earlier, fail fast. I think really this is where Jane Wanacott and I inherited the states of Guernsey when we got it. Everything was in silos. Everything was bespoke. Everything was, you couldn't touch that, didn't interact with each other. We couldn't get a coherent view. So actually, across the totality of that, we inherited about 10 IT services and 10 IT departments across the states of Guernsey. By just basic knowledge, that is going to have some issues to do with efficiency and et cetera, et cetera. Where we want to move to is this: common platforms. This isn't the case of, the term we use is gubbins, because it doesn't matter what it is. Very clever people from JT, Shaw, some of the tech firms, Resolution IT, Next Generation IT, Infrasoft Tech, will do all the clever stuff for us. It's gubbins. But let's use common platforms. Now, for example, do you now know we have a single payment platform across the states of Guernsey now? 4 weeks ago, Jane, I think we had 3. Yes, that's good at things because it means like we're PCI DSS compliant and all that other sort of stuff. But that's a core enabler to take them to its next step, which is an Amazon-type wallet for e-government for you to use. We're looking to run about 10 or 11 of these digital sprints next year alone. And that is predicated on a fail-fast methodology. That does, of course, challenge some of our traditional methodologies on procurement and on financial release. But actually what's really good is my colleagues in the Treasury and the political oversight understand we need to do this differently. A monolithic system that takes 15 years to deploy will invariably be too late, won't do what you want it to do, and the world will have moved on. An example of this is healthcare. Healthcare is big and monolithic, trust me. But going back to our wall, we have done some of these already, At the base level, the IT infrastructure. Last year, once again, not particularly well known about, I think Deputy Heidi Salisbury made some comments on this, we replaced the entire desktop architecture of the entirety of health, removing all Windows XP machines. Fortunately, 2 weeks before WannaCry hit. Now, the two weren't causally linked, unless I can actually claim it as vision by me in the future. At the moment, there are procurements going through, so I won't get into too many details, once again, to replace the entire local area network across the entirety of healthcare. That's not just Wi-Fi in the hospital, that is digital connectivity across the entirety of health and social care in the community. That changes how you deliver services. And the last part is the upgrade to things like the Children's Information Database, maternity systems, SUS and ERS, I won't get into too much detail. That's our connectivity into the NHS core systems for remote booking, etc., and core patient records. That is the programme of work for one department over the next 18 months. The challenge, of course, is how does the department react to that? How does it lever this new technology so actually your care in the community nurse will now have full access to your patient record? How does that challenge the way that the ambulance could turn up, and at the moment the ambulance turns up, stabilises you, puts you in the back and takes you home, or takes you to the hospital, wherever it might be. In the future, that ambulance could have your last 3 or 4 medical incidents on its database. It can know you are diabetic. It could treat you at the roadside or in your home. How does that change the delivery of healthcare? How do we wrap that in with GDPR, etc., and make sure it's done appropriately, clearly, and above board? These are all challenges, especially in our healthcare system where we have effectively 3 different healthcare providers, 2 of which are private. Sorry, 3, including St John's. But also, some of it is the basics, and we've got to do the basics well to allow you guys to thrive in whatever businesses you want to. Digital connectivity, I think from the IOD, week before last, came out as the top priority for government, or one of the top priorities for government. I agree with that. I don't think any of the telco providers in the room would disagree with that. I don't think any of the businesses in the room would disagree with that. It's a core part of the policy and resources plan. It's in the sector framework. We've done reports, either through SICRA or our own reports. What do we want to do? Accelerate investment in infrastructure, the core basics of our network. Deliver next generation services and reduce cost to customers and set a USO. A USO is a universal service obligation, so effectively says everybody will get a certain level of service. The challenge with the USO is how high or how low do you set it? Now Guernsey, once again, I think is uniquely placed. We can set a high USO because we're quite small. In the UK, their USO they're looking at, I think it's about 20 megabits per second, if that, 10 or so. Because if you go to Norfolk, you cannot get the internet, which isn't a huge problem because most people in Norfolk, they can't actually read the internet. But here, it's because I holiday in Norfolk. Here, we could look at USOs north of 50, 60, 70, 80, 90 megabits per second as a residential point. That transforms how Guernsey operates. We can provide fibre connectivity, fibre to the home connectivity for businesses in our core business hubs. Once again, that transforms how business works. But please be under no illusion, these businesses are already running here. The conversation we'll have later from First Central Group, from Tag Team, from JT, means they can't operate without that level of connectivity. The question is how do we take it to the next level before it becomes a limiting factor? And as I said, I won't get into too many details because Peter Fairbridge will make a sector statement on the 13th of December. We have engaged with SICRA and the telcos, and we will, at those points, come out with those delivery timescales. Lastly, and I have to say this at the end, is cybersecurity. If we are to position ourselves as a data-driven jurisdiction, or wrong, I'll reword that. If we are to continue to position ourselves as a data-driven jurisdiction, we have to protect ourselves. The number of attacks we see coming in on businesses, government, across the entirety, are at levels that I've never experienced before and will continually grow. That's not because Guernsey is a particular threat, it is just the world is moving on. What were government level capabilities 5 years ago, I can now buy on the deep web for a few Bitcoin. So things are changing and changing rapidly. And once again, government is positioning itself to provide those capabilities, and importantly for me, working with our sister jurisdiction of Jersey in order to do so. Because we as Guernsey can protect ourselves, but all our businesses, and especially our telcos, work in between the islands. I live and breathe this stuff because it happens in government. We have to protect ourselves, we have to protect you. So once again, I go back to my 4 core themes, and hopefully I'm just about on time. We need to work together, and we need to shout a little bit louder about what we're doing, because we're doing it well. Government is an enabler, and if we're not, come and tell me, or any of your politicians. And we do have plans, after a long period of building the foundations, to make your lives better. It's a call to arms. Let's go forward.